So there's this thing that we do in the industry, and a lot of people do that, where they confuse the terms customer and consumer, and they're not the same. So now somebody says, like, you have to treat your customers well, I tend to agree. When people say you have to treat your consumers well, I don't even know what the hell that means. Because a customer is concrete, a consumer is nebulous. A consumer is literally anybody that ever spent money on any object in the world as a business transaction. Then you're a consumer. You don't have to buy video games, you're still a consumer. You can be a games consumer. That doesn't really mean anything as well, except for that you once bought a game. They probably don't even want your games. They're probably not interested in your games. Like, the largest part of consumers is definitely not interested in our games. Our customers are. We know that for a fact. So you don't really need the consumers. You need customers, maybe. And a customer is somebody who bought your game. A potential customer is somebody that might buy your game. Potential customers is who we market to. When you market your game, you're not trying to convince somebody that doesn't want your game that they really want your game. You're trying to find people that would buy your game if only they knew about it, and then convince them to buy your game, right? So we do an interactive entertainment. Why is this slight line down to the right? That's weird. We do an interactive entertainment. So what we do is create it for an audience. Like, at the core of video games is the idea that we create something, and then somebody else sits in front of it, or holds the device, or interacts with it in some way, and based on their interaction, we give back a different game state, and then they respond to that, and that loop is a video game, right? We all agree about that. That's what's at the heart of video game, is that little loop of interaction. It can be anything. It can be walking around, it can be shooting, it can be talking, it can be jumping. It doesn't really matter. So we inherently need an audience. We inherently need somebody to sit down, play the game. But we also run a studio to earn money. We want to ensure that we have food. We want to ensure that we can pay rent. Hopefully we can pay a good salary. Optimally, we can pay a good salary. And then we also have to manage a community. We have to make sure that it's a positive community that is sharing and understanding and positive and beautiful words like that. And we're also an industry that is a larger ecosystem that as a whole, to be honest, is kind of not in a great spot right now. We have the race to the bottom, we have discoverability issues. All the mobile companies decided that mobile is like kind of hard to deal with, and discoverability is hard, and user acquisition is expensive. So they're all going to PC games because PC games have the future. And all the PC developers are like, well, discoverability on PC is hard, so you know what, we're going to do console games because it's easy to get found there. And all the console developers are like, console games are really expensive, we're going to make cheaper games, so we're going to go to mobile. We're all just looping in circles. I don't really know what's happening. But like, it's not going perfectly, right? We're kind of in a tough spot. So those are four things, and for a strange reason, those four things feel at odd. They don't feel like they fit together really well. And part of that, the reason why they feel at odds, is because we fucked up. We fucked up pretty bad. We've not been treating our audience like adults, and we've trained them to have really super unreasonable expectations. You don't really think about that, but this is my favorite example of that. Apparently, this is how you do motion capture. Just somebody does the performance, and then ta-da! This is literally a screenshot from a little video where they showed how they made Uncharted. So from that point to that point, there's nothing. There's not the people that rig the character. There's not the people that clean up the animation. There's not the people that make the character or that weigh the character or that do the texturing. There's none of that. It's just magic. It's like Unity. If you have a project that runs perfectly on PC, all you have to do is press the button. It runs perfectly on PlayStation 4. It does that in every engine in the world, by the way. We had somebody come to us and say, like, why doesn't Nuclear Throne run on PlayStation 4 yet? And we're like, well, you know, that takes a bit of work. And they're like, why don't you use Unity? We're like, well, because we use GameMaker. They're like, why don't you import it in Unity? We're like, because we use GameMaker. Like, can't you export that? It's like, no, that doesn't work. And they were so confused by that. Because our industry has been really good at teaching people that putting a game on a console is a press of a button. You want to add a new character to your game, you just put somebody in a suit like that, and ta-da, it's a character. You know, that pencil right there just magically appeared in this screenshot. They didn't even have to motion capture it. It's just there. It's what the camera does. It's great. You know, the problem is this industry wants to be perfect. We want to be perfect. We want to be flawless because it's a gamer's world. There's no obstacles, just challenges, right? That's bullshit. We want everything to look easy. We want everything to look doable. We've trained our audience that they can expect a clear answer to every single question. Doesn't matter what the question is. If you say, like, we don't know, you know what they tell you? They tell you that that's bad design. There's something really painful there. The majority of design is admitting that you don't know. The majority of design is sitting down and trying something and being like, I don't know if this works. Now somebody changes like a tiny value for a single gun in Call of Duty. Do you remember that? Because it was one of the largest shit shows I've seen aimed at a single human being in the pre-recent controversy era. And for some reason, we're fine with that. We pander. Instead of telling people like, okay, listen, sure, Unity will get the game to run on PlayStation 4 with a single press of a button, but then we still have the TRCs, we have the certification requirements, we still have to make the game work with a controller, we still have to make sure that it works on every aspect ratio. There's some performance issues. No, we can't just put it on PlayStation Vita because the PlayStation Vita isn't quite as powerful as a PC. No, Nintendo DS is also kind of hard. You know, we can't just put it there. No, did you notice that it has 2 screens? Yeah, Unity doesn't just fix that. No, we can't put it on VR just yet. No, it's a 2D pixel game. We haven't thought that through. But everybody says like, yeah, we'll look into it. So here's the thing. We are developers, not gamers. Okay? We gave up gamer when we became a creator. We're a creator now. We can be proud of that. Doesn't mean we hate video games. Nobody says like, there's not some sort of unwritten law that unless you call yourself a gamer, you can't love video games, right? When Orson Welles said, I don't really like cinema unless when I'm shooting it, nobody went like, hey, you should be a movieer. You should always say you love movies. Orson Welles spent most of his time talking shit about other movies. He didn't like other movies. That's why he made movies. He liked 1 or 2 movies. That's the movies he was inspired by, and then he just made his own stuff. But for some reason, we want to desperately claim to the identity of gamer. We can love games and not be gamers. We can just be developers. And our attitude doesn't have to be like wild, aggressive enthusiasm for everything that happens. When somebody comes to me and says like, have you heard this thing that's awesome? I can be critical. I earn my money in this business. Somebody comes to me and goes like, have you heard that Game Maker now runs on platform X? I just be like, yeah, I'd like to try that first. I'd like to see about that. Have you heard about this thing? Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really figured it out yet. Let me look into it. We're developers. You know what defines a developer? You make games. That's it, period. If you're a game developer and you hate video games, that's fine. There are developers that despise games. Like, sadly, no longer like a studio, Tale of Tales. They hated games. They made some of the most inspiring games I've played. So we can treat our audience like adults. Quite a number of them are adult or at least mature human beings. Some kids are actually really mature human beings. They just kind of tend to lay low. Large part of that is because we allow a lot of assholes into our community, like the guy at the start of my presentation. And part of that is because we're scared to piss off customers. And yes, it's true. Every response counts, right? If you give a response and it's not the right response according to somebody, they might put it on Reddit, or they might put it on Twitter, or they can get really, really angry at you, and they can write a really angry email. They can send spam to your forums. They can sign you up for all sorts of weird mailing lists. They can harass you for the next few months of your life. Every time you interact with somebody, there's a potential chance to mess up, right? That also works the other way, by the way. Every time you oversimplify something to your consumer, to your customer, you're teaching them that it works that way, and you make everything just a tiny little bit harder for every other game developer in the world. So if somebody asks you a question whether it's easy, Think about it for a second. Like, no, actually, it's not. It just seems easy to us because we've been doing this for all of our life, but it might actually be hard. More importantly, the customer is not always right. Nor are you, but like, the customer isn't always right. If the customer was always right, I wouldn't have a job. You wouldn't have a job. Doctors wouldn't have a job. Nobody would have a job because the customer's always right. If they knew so well, then what's the point of our job? The point of our job is that we make stuff, and we don't know whether it's right. That's the whole point of being creative. No idea. You just start at A and you go to question mark, and hopefully it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. If the customer is always right, every game that releases right now would be a zombie survival Minecraft MMO with spaceships, with colors, because colors are hip again, right? But that didn't happen because the customers wanted that. That happened because the games industry at some point went like, you're kind of done with brown. How about colors? That could be cool. We've done gray. Gray was cool. We've done weird green. How about just colors? And now everything is colors. It's not as if the customers just went like, hey, we want colors. Customers went like, we want more realism. And they went like, sure, we'll give you more realism. Here's a lot of colors. And nobody went like, that's not real. And they're like, oh, cool, colors. So the point is that a customer is usually not a game developer. Some of them are. Like, there's a lot of customers that also make games or that tinker with games if they have used GameMaker. They're customers. Part of our job is to figure out what they want or not give a shit about what they want, and then find customers for that, right?